Hello, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, the IDF searches for an armed terrorist. The standoff over the Amona settlement outpost grows even more intense, and we'll reveal why Israel's poverty rate is dropping. I'm Natasha Kirchak here with the latest news in Israel. An Israeli family is struggling to recover from the terror of being shot at while driving home. Fortunately, no one was hit in the attack, which happened yesterday evening just outside of Ramallah in the West Bank. A mother was driving with her two young children in the back seat when the gunman opened fire. The car sustained considerable damage by multiple bullet holes. Today, the Israeli army is conducting widespread searches for the perpetrator, who had fled the scene after attacking the family. Just a few hours before, a 21-year-old Palestinian man attacked a group of policemen with a screwdriver in Jerusalem's Old City. The assailant managed to cause injuries to one officer's head and another's upper body, before being fatally shot. Police are also investigating the claim from a 12-year-old who says he was also wounded after being attacked by the Palestinian. The attacker has been identified as an illegal worker who managed to infiltrate the Jewish state from the Palestinian Authority. The standoff over the impending evacuation of the Amona settlement outpost is becoming even more tense by the moment. The 40 families living in the illegal West Bank outpost are rejecting a government compensation deal to leave, and now both sides are gearing up for what could become a major confrontation within the next 10 days. 6 miners were arrested during the night on suspicion they were throwing stones to protest the outpost demolition slated for December 25th. Hundreds of young people have been gathering in Amona today amid a rash of rumors on social media that the Israeli army was coming at dawn this morning to carry out the eviction early. Even though that didn't happen, the activists are now reportedly erecting barricades from dumpsters and gathering rocks and tires to burn. The settlers are accusing the government of betrayal and backtracking on its support for Jews to live in Judea and Samaria. They deny Amona was knowingly built on Palestinian property as ruled by the High Court, which ordered the outpost to be dismantled. Even more worrying, some of the protesters today are refusing to rule out the possibility they would use violence against security forces. When 9 of the outpost's buildings were razed back in 2006, hundreds were injured when clashes broke out between demonstrators and Israeli security. Residents and demonstrators at the Amona outpost settlement have begun to get restless. Protesters are preparing for the worst as the Amona residents reject the evacuation order over their settlement, as well as the accompanying agreements promised to them. Here to discuss the facts on the ground are Mai Golan, a conservative activist and the CEO of Hebrew City, Professor Moshe Amirav, a professor of political science at the Hebrew University, and Ali Fould, the assistant director of Standing Together and advocate for Israel. Thanks so much for coming in, guys.
Thank you for having us.
All right, so to begin, Ari, I understand that you've been sleeping for the past couple of nights in Amona, so you're really getting a sense of what's happening on the ground. What are the emotions that people are feeling? What have you witnessed?
I've been speaking to many families, the kids especially, and they feel betrayed. The parents don't know how to explain this to the kids. I mean, they bought their homes 18 years ago. The government built the roads there, gave them electricity, gave them water. Their only sin is they're living in Judea. And how do they explain this to the kids? The kids are really, they feel betrayed. They're not going to school for the last couple of weeks, and they just don't know what to do with themselves. They're saying, why is this happening? Along with the claims that people are making, which really have no basis, they feel like they've just been betrayed by their own people, and they don't know where to turn.
So let's talk about this settlement law. The settlement law being proposed has already made it past its initial reading, but where does Amona fit into that bill? Talk to us about Amona specifically.
Well, that settlement is a fraud. You know, we're talking about 41 families who are, the majority of them are going to be kicked to the curb. There are only 11 families that in this settlement will be able, to live on the mountain, and only for 2 years. So this is really not a solution for the Amona people. But the most important thing here, Natasha, is the fact that, they're talking about the fact that this is a private land and Amona should be evacuated. I heard the mayor of Jerusalem, Nir Barkat, just a couple of days ago saying that there are thousands of houses of Arabs on private lands of Jews that are not being evacuated at the same time. Nothing is being done. And if Amona will be evacuated, those houses will be needed to evacuate it as well. So you need to remember that in the end of the day, we're talking about a place that belongs to the Jewish country. It belongs to the Jewish nation. And using the court, to try and get some justice, it's basically just using the tool to destroy and demolish a beautiful and very successful community. And Amona is the first one. Next will be Ofra, and next will be many places in Israel that shouldn't be allowed, because in the end of the day, we have to remember that Amona and Efrat and all these places are a part of Israel. And just like they're not evacuating the University of Tel Aviv, that is also sitting on a settlement, because it's Sheikh Munis, if someone doesn't remember, Amona and the rest of the places shouldn't be evacuated. And those radical lefties and those very big humanitarians from the court that are fighting against those Jewish people need to stop being hypocrite and remember that Israel belongs to the Jews, all of Israel land, after all the years we've been fighting to come back here.
Professor, what is your take on this situation?
When I see it, it's a kind of a déjà vu. I remember other places and other times where we Israelis did the same thing. I mean, we left the area and we put Jews in a terrible situation. And I'm speaking about, not now about the human aspect. I came here actually to speak a little bit about the political issue. And the political issue, if I have to say it in one sentence, the majority of the people of Israel, the majority of the settlers, the majority of the government, the prime minister, I agree, as an Israeli, I agree with them. All of them say that we have to evacuate Amona. All of them. Now, Amona is only a symbol. I mean, it's, 40 families or whatever. We're speaking about the West Bank. And soon, according to Netanyahu, the prime minister, if we have peace, we will have many Amonas. And then it might be that it will be like we have seen before. Then it will be really big, because then we are speaking about evacuating thousands. Here we are speaking about 40, 50 people. That's nothing. So we have to see Amona in a perspective of what's going on and what will be the solution for the political situation if we have peace. I'm now defending the prime minister, okay? I'm not in his party. I didn't vote for him, but he is my prime minister. And the prime minister says we have to do it. And I'm not the only one. The majority of the people are in favor of doing it.
Now, some of the residents have pledged nonviolence when the evacuation does take place. But police are still concerned that there will be violence when this happens, right? Should we be worried about violence? Should we be worried about clashes? What can we expect to happen?
Before I answer that question, it's an important question. I just want to relate to something the professor said. Unlike all the other evacuations that happened, which came from the legislative branch of government, the Knesset, there were government decisions, this one was not. For the last 9 years, the nation has voted right. The Supreme Court has a very left-wing ideology, and they're dictating Israeli policy according to that ideology. It is the most undemocratic thing that a court system can do. It's unacceptable, it's immoral, it's unethical. Now, in terms of Amona, again, the people went there. In Hebrew, we say b'tom lev, innocently. The government paid for the utilities. So if it's anyone's fault, it's the state's fault, not the people living there. The state should pay the Arabs after they bring proof of ownership, which to date, no one has brought proof of ownership. There's no private person saying, hey, you took my land. No such thing. This whole thing is a political move. I agree with the professor, but a political move by the Supreme Court, which is absolutely undemocratic.
We have to remember that the Supreme Court has been ruling the country of Israel and the members of the Knesset that we chose actually in a lot of topics around Israel. I don't remember us going to the elections and choosing the Supreme Court to make our decisions about our life, but they are still doing whatever they want.
1/3 of the people who choose the next judges are judges. So it's a cycle. I want to just talk about the violence for 1 second.
Let's hear what the professor has to say for a second.
Yeah, I have to tell you that in a democratic country, the majority decides.
Okay,
Not the
and
Supreme Court.
may I remind you...
And you, let me finish.
But may I remind you, Professor, the majority of the country chose a right-wing government, so those left radical judges won't control our lives.
So this majority in a democratic country, you have to respect the decision of the democratic system in this country.
Of the government, of the people, the ministers and the members of the Knesset that we chose.
And you are challenging the Knesset and the government and the Prime Minister and the judges.
It's really hilarious when the High Supreme Court judges keep talking about democracy and freedom of speech, but when it comes to actually making the decisions of the majority of the members of the Knesset that the people have chosen, you are constantly dismiss and stamp on every decision that is being made by the members of the Knesset.
I think that we have to stay a democracy.
You're right, but the democracy is the
what you are saying now is very dangerous to the Israeli democracy.
But
all right, so let's change the subject. I mean, clearly we're seeing, differing opinions on what should be taking place in Amona, but we want to know what is happening right now in the sense, are we going to be seeing violence when Israeli security forces go into this territory and try to take the people out?
The time that I spent in Amona right now, the residents there are having meeting after meeting. There are tears, real tears going down. It's a horrific, horrific thing to see. The idea that you're kicking Jews out of their homes in the land of Israel is something that literally brings tears to my eyes. In terms of violence, I don't know who's spreading those rumors, blood libels, lies. The only side that was violent in 2005 was the police. And so
2005 was the last time.
Right, correct. It was horrific.
Specify to our viewers when...
It was the last time that they came in and they actually destroyed 9 homes that were built by the actual Israeli government, the Ministry of Housing. They were legally built. And they destroyed those homes with such violence that I can't even express the disappointment. This time, the police had said they will not bring in horses and batons. Okay, that's lovely, but you're kicking people out of their homes. That is violent.
All right, so I mean, in your guys' opinion, what should the solution be here? What would be the best option for everybody, for both the settlers or the Israelis living in the settlement and also just, the nation as a whole and the Palestinian people?
So again, you're asking for a solution. If there's a person saying it's my land, then the solution is bring them to court. But there is no side of that that's saying it's my land. So the solution is let the Jews live there until someone claims the land is theirs. And within the Israeli borders, when someone claims the land is theirs, that a building was built on it, you pay that person money worth of the land. There are 2 dunam out of the 500 dunams of Amona that are being claimed as Arab. You're destroying 500 dunams because a person is claiming verbally ownership over 2? Without any proof of purchase? Why do I need a solution? Let the Jews stay there.
Professor?
The solution is either to put the Israeli law on the West Bank and declare that this is Israel. Right now, these people in Amona are abroad. They're not in Israel, legally. So we have to decide. At least in this sense, I am with the Prime Minister who says when we have peace, we will have to give up on, let's say, 90% of the West Bank, and then 10% we will annex. But now we didn't annex Amona, we didn't annex 10%, we didn't annex anything. So the West Bank is abroad. And if you ask me in a broad perspective, we have to decide, what do we want? Do we want peace with part of Israel, which is the idea of Netanyahu? He says we're ready for peace, and we will give up on between 6 to 10% of the West Bank.
Maybe we don't need to give up anything for peace. Maybe we just need to claim our country.
I'm not the Prime Minister. I'm telling here
Can I just say one sentence?
About what the Israeli majority is thinking. What we hear here, I mean, this is a very legalistic opinion.
You keep talking about majority. The majority have voted for right. The majority have voted for the whole of country of Israel to stay safe.
Not for Netanyahu.
No, he didn't win the majority vote.
I'm a political science expert. Maybe I don't understand.
There's a coalition government.
Who is the Prime Minister in Israel
Prime Minister does not have a
today?
majority. It's a coalition government.
It's a coalition.
Let's hear from Mai.
I just want to say something because both sides here said very specific, solutions for Amona, and I want to speak for a second, generally speaking. Amona, my opinion, obviously, is that Amona should stay where she is and not be evacuated. This is our country, and we shouldn't have given it up to anyone. But I want to say, generally speaking, so we won't have this problem in the future. The solution is to bring the power back to the democracy, to the people of the country of Israel. We should gain and demand, not by some sort of an asking way, by our basic right to get our power back from the radical left Supreme Court that is making our lives looks like hell in various decisions and states of life in Israel. The country and the members of the Knesset should remember immediately who chose them, why were they chosen, and who is the public that they are representing. They are representing the people that they promised to keep their settlements, that they promised to keep their country safe, not to make the High Supreme Court happy with their decisions when they're sitting in their high, buildings, very detached from the reality on the streets. I'm living this reality in South Tel Aviv, and I know the people in Amona are feeling the same. So my solution is to maybe remind, if this settlement, chas v'shalom, God forbid, will happen, I believe that the people of Amona and the people of the rest of Israel will remember who not to vote next time around. And that's what the politicians should remember.
Well, I guess we're going to just have to wait and see what happens. Thank you guys so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Speaking of Amona, the Movement for Quality Government is alarmed by political attempts to influence and override rulings by the Supreme Court. Movement attorney Michael Pardim told ILTV's Steve Leibowitz that retroactive laws do great damage to the rule of law.
Is the Supreme Court justly under attack?
No. The Supreme Court is part of the attacks have to do with an attempt to influence the Supreme Court, to try to keep the Supreme Court in check. And to a certain extent, and occasionally they're successful. We do not have an extremely activist Supreme Court. In the past, we've had more activist Supreme Courts. The number of pieces of legislation that are overturned or nullified is really quite small. You can count them, over the decade, on the fingers of one hand.
The Supreme Court has ordered that Amona be evacuated by December 25th. Some of the right-wing Knesset members, right-wing parties, and including ministers, are trying to now come up with a law that bypasses and in fact undercuts this Supreme Court ruling. Is this a dangerous phenomenon?
Well, it remains to be seen. It's not a dangerous phenomenon that the Knesset wants to enact a law or to change the legislative landscape with new legislation. The Knesset is the sovereign and expresses the will of the people. And in that respect, we don't want to detract from what the Knesset is able to do. The Supreme Court is there in certain extreme instances to keep other branches of government from going, to the extreme. So it remains to be seen whether this legislation will actually do damage to the appearance that it's trying to circumvent the Bagatz, the Supreme Court, or in fact is just an attempt by the Knesset at new legislation, which is totally legitimate. And that the test will be, I think, and there's a lot of discussion on this point, whether this legislation will be retroactive or just going forward. If it's retroactive, that would appear to be more of a a stab at the Supreme Court.
Part of what this law is going to be doing, in effect, is declaring that illegal outposts, which are sitting on privately owned Arab land, can keep that land. The land will, in effect, be taken away from the rightful owners, handed over to the Jewish settlers who are there, even by Supreme Court definition, illegally at this point. And isn't that something which will open Israel up to all sorts of international law criticism, and not to mention how we look at ourselves?
I think when you have a certain political position, the answers are clear-cut. If you're just looking strictly at the legal position, we have two hands, the lawyers, so we have, you can always, if it would be, I would say, almost unthinkable that there wouldn't be a number of possible positions that one could take to either justify or unjustify or condemn, certain as a legal position. So, and these do seem to be really complex issues involving local law, international law, what the status of the territories, of the status of Judea Samaria, or the territories as you call them, I would not like to, because I'm vice chairman of the Movement for Quality Government, I wouldn't want to venture in a position on this, and so people would think that this is the position of the movement. I think people in the movement come with a broad spectrum of political opinions, but when we get into the movement and we concentrate on doing the business of the movement, which is why I think we've been able to attract such support from all parts of the political spectrum.
Okay, Michael Parham, thanks so much for being with us at ILTV.
You're very welcome.
Rifts between the Palestinians are growing deeper, and it's not just between the Islamist Hamas terrorist rulers of Gaza and PA President Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah faction. Now Abbas is taking unprecedented action against the 5 greatest rivals within his own political party. The move to put his main adversaries behind bars is also placing Abbas at odds with regional Arab leaders. Aaron, what are we to make of this?
The truth is that it's kind of up in the air. Your guess is as good as mine. This could be a real turning point with, in the inner workings of how Fatah and the Palestinian Authority works.
A Palestinian court just sentenced Mohammed Dalan to 3 years in prison for allegedly embezzling $16 million while he was a Palestinian Authority cabinet minister. Dalan was once one of the most important leaders in Fatah, but he was kicked out and exiled abroad in 2010 after tangling with Abbas in a power play. Abbas has also gone so far as to openly accuse his rival of murdering Yasser Arafat. Dalan now lives in the United Arab Emirates and was tried in absentia. The trial was reportedly held at the speed of lightning and took place just 1 day after Abbas lifted his parliamentary immunity. 4 of Dalan's allies are facing similar circumstances as well. Sources say the 4 may be charged with embezzlement, weapons smuggling, defamation, and even insults they may have made against Abbas. All 5 of the marked Palestinians were banned from attending the recent Fatah Leadership Congress. This latest move by Abbas comes in defiance of the call from the so-called Arab Quartet, consisting of Jordan, Egypt, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. The Arab Quartet has been calling on Abbas to make peace with Dalan.
It looks like Europe could be in major trouble because, according to a secret assessment from Israeli intelligence, the entire continent is simply unable to defend itself militarily. The Hebrew Ynet news service claims to have accessed a classified document produced by the Israeli Foreign Ministry's intelligence wing. According to the paper, the findings reveal that not a single European country is capable of launching a defensive operation on its own, and that all of Europe is overly dependent on the U.S. for military support. These disclosures are shocking, particularly at a time when Islamist terror and even Russia's invasion of the Baltic region pose increasing threats to the continent's security. And it seems that it's not just a lack of ability, but also will. The secret papers indicate most European countries are simply unwilling to use force to defend themselves. It was concluded this reluctance is because of the nation's own foreign policies, as well as the requirements of membership in NATO, which is dominated by the US. The Israeli report is also said to observe that Europe is increasingly worried that the U.S. military support they've come to rely on so heavily may be significantly weakened by incoming President-elect Donald Trump. We have some great economic news for most Israelis. New reports claim that poverty levels are falling almost across the board. So this is amazing news, Aaron. What can you tell us about it?
No, the report is really incredible. It basically states that the total number of people in Israel who are under the official poverty line is shrinking. And as of yet, it's not, a huge percentage difference, but there are some really positive trends that I think we can look forward to.
The government's annual report just came out, showing the number of people living under the official poverty line fell to 21.7% in 2015 from 22% the previous year. Child poverty declined by an entire percentage point as well, from 31 to 30. The number of impoverished elderly citizens also dropped from 23.1% to 21.7%. Perhaps the greatest improvement, though, is being seen by ultra-Orthodox Jews, who traditionally suffer high rates of unemployment. Poverty levels went down significantly for them, from 54.3% to 48.7%, as more have been joining the workforce. Exceptions to the good news are overall poverty levels for families, which slightly climbed from 18.8% to 19.1%. In addition, even though studies show Israeli Arab men and women are being paid more, the number of their poor was up a little too, to 53.3% instead of 52.6%. Looking to the future, most experts are expressing optimism that by next year, even more Israelis will be able to break the cycle. The government has been increasing assistance and also designed a new plan to help single mothers. Furthermore, everyone's looking forward to the raising of the minimum wage, which is set to go into effect at the start of 2017. And that's something we can all celebrate this new year.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. Everything seems to go better when you feel in control of yourself. So today's word is shlita, meaning control. Shlita is a noun that comes from the root letters shin, lamed, tet. Put them together and you get shalat, meaning a controller, like the one for your TV, and change the vowel slightly and you get shelet, meaning a sign like those on the street. It actually makes sense because both are devices that are meant to control, or lishlot. But don't forget that ultimately all the shlita over your life is still yours. Still though, make sure not to take life too seriously, let loose once in a while and lose shlita. It will help keep things exciting. Let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast.
ILTV's weather forecast is sponsored by Adopt a Savta, taking care of Israel's lonely Holocaust survivors.
Tonight will be mostly cloudy with some scattered showers and a low of 53 or 12 degrees Celsius. You can expect the weekend to feel just a little colder as light scattered showers continue through Saturday. The high should be roughly 60 degrees or 16 degrees Celsius. All right, everybody, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.84 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. Thanks for watching and see you tonight.